Hi everyone, from me, Brent Graham of Good for the Game. It's Thursday night at 9 o'clock, time for our regular session of the Handicap Rugby Chat That Matters. We're going to be talking rugby betting, of course. We've got 6 Super Rugby games to look forward to. And then this should be a shorter show. I'm going to say that with a bit of hesitation because sometimes I call the short show and it doesn't work out that way. We find all sorts of things to discuss. But we've only got 2 games taking place in Europe, and that is, of course, the finals, the Challenge Cup and the Champions Cup. And who better to chat with us than the Moss Man all the way from Auckland in New Zealand. Nathan, great to have you back on the show, mate.
Yeah, thanks very much. I know when I used to check out the show back in the day that generally someone will be cracking a beer around this time, but unfortunately for me, it's 7 a.m, so it's tea only, which is a bit disappointing. Generally frowned upon, I suppose, to be cracking a few beers before work on a Friday morning. Not in Germany though. I actually always remember when I traveling around Europe and catching a train in Germany, and there'd be, guys waiting on the platform, and it was perfectly fine there to crack a breakfast beer, like in Germany on the way to work, which, I thought was an interesting piece of culture.
Oh, that is interesting. Well, I guess, the reverse sort of applies as well. I just finished a cup of tea, and that's also frowned upon here in South Africa at 9 o'clock at night. I should be drinking something a little bit stronger.
Absolutely.
But, it looks like we've already got a lot of guys in the live chat. Mark, of course, saying, come on, Leinster. Mark, you'll like the shirt I'm wearing. It doesn't necessarily reflect my views on the game. I'm battling with that one. I'm hoping Nathan will give me some guidance. Peter Paul in the studio, the Crow Tips. Hi, everyone, especially Mark. How are you feeling, pal? And, let's go down the list, see who else there. Chris is joining us as well, of course, also looking for Leinster. Just by the way, I've told you about the intelligence that the Leinster's guys get. Nathan, if you go to the private chat on the dashboard, can you see the Leinster team that I've posted there?
No, not at the moment.
Oh, okay. I'll try to do it a little bit later. Anyway, I had Dave Cooney send me through what he believes is going to be the Leinster team, so I'll be interested to see how accurate that is. Blake coming in as well. Plenty scar tissue to shake off between Leinster and Toulouse. Reverend, he's also in New Zealand. Morning, guys. 2M Systems here as well. Right, guys, say hello to all of you. Looking forward to the show. Let's get stuck in. We'll start with Super Rugby, as we usually do. Nathan, am I right in saying this is now the penultimate round of the group stages? So we're getting really close to finalising our last 8.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Right. Well, the first game, Chiefs -4.5 against the Hurricanes. This line opened in South Africa 2.5. I went 4.5. I must say I did project this one pretty much where it is now. We've got a points line of 53.5. What can you tell us here, Nathan?
What I can tell you, so in general, there's 2 types of bookmakers. So there's the recreational bookmakers, so the ones that, as soon as you show a bit of a pulse when it comes to betting, they'll start limiting you, restricting your accounts. And then there's the sharp bookmakers, the likes of Pinnacle, who will welcome winners, have posted limits, and general will sort of auto move based on the action. So at the moment, you've got sort of Bet365 and the books that tend to copy their number that are still around a 3.5. And Pinnacle sometimes can be the canary in the coal mine in terms of where the money is going. And it's certainly in terms of the way I approach things when I'm back testing models, etc. I'll do it on the Pinnacle closing line because I think in general that's the sharpest number. And I say that because Pinnacle's already at 5.5, and Bet365 is still, I think, at 3.5. So I think that the direction that the money is going is towards the Chiefs, and that's something that's sort of been fairly sort of coming in that direction since teams have been named. So I think that these are they're around about even teams. Now, depending on how much you want to give for home field advantage, 3-4 points, something around that takes you right up to this number. I think what's possibly not being accounted for in the 3.5 that you're seeing out there is the loss of Tyrell Lomax, which I think is a big one. So the scrum has been a big weapon for the Hurricanes, especially in the early part of the season. If you look at obviously that scrum from the early part of the season, you're now missing 2 of those 3 front rowers that were there, Almua and Lomax. So I think that would have been a big weapon for them, and that has obviously been mitigated now. So my feeling is that the Chiefs are still the right side.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I kept this game there, but when I'm looking at it, I'm just reading Fareed's comment here. He says all over the Canes. For me, Nathan, there's also that little bit of a feeling with the Hurricanes that I don't want to say they peaked too early and out of the running, but they played a lot of great rugby early doors. And to me, they just haven't been the same side maybe in recent weeks, whereas possibly the Chiefs weren't maybe as efficient as we expected them early in the competition, but I kind of get the feeling they're building to something. I'm with you on the Chiefs there. What do you think on the Hurricanes' current form? Do you get they were comfortably the best team in the competition for some time, but for me, they've just dropped off a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they started with a hiss and a roar. I think they were unbeaten through the first 7-8 games, whatever it was. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, they've dropped 2 out of the last 4, and I think you're right in the sense that the Chiefs were very similar to that last year. They came out of the blocks hard. They were kind of the best team all season, and then sort of fell at the last hurdle. Sometimes you find with teams that are like that they kind of learn from that experience, and they sometimes keep the powder a little bit drier in the following seasons.
Yeah, that's it. They might have learned from that a little bit. Look, a lot of support, I must say, for the Hurricanes in the live chat. Johanna Esthuizen coming in on them. Chris reckons it's a bit of a coin toss, and I think you're probably right there, Chris. And for Reed, also on them. Chiefs at home should hold off the Canes. Dan coming in and agreeing with us on that one. Just any comment on the points before we move on? 53.5 for New Zealand Derby looks pretty well set to me.
Yeah, pretty well. I've got 54, so it's right around that number. So, although that said, that there were better numbers than that out there, I took an over at 51.5 and an under at 55.5, to be fair. So, yeah, there's a variety of numbers out there.
Yeah, not a bad idea to look for a middle in that type of situation. I don't know, I used to keep a lot of stats on it years ago, but to me, the New Zealand, and I think this has changed quite a bit, but the New Zealand derbies, you could almost throw a blanket over like it would be between 45 and 55 points. It was like you'd probably get 35 in the first half and then like 19 in the second or whatever. And I used to look, I think it was Bet Exchange used to have quite a nice price on like the I think it was like 48 to 56 points, somewhere there. And used to do quite well on that one, although I haven't seen that bet around anymore. Right, let's move on to the next game. This game is also where, let me just double check my cap on the game. I actually thought, I got this one a bit wrong. I went Brumbies minus 10.5. It is 14.5. Seems to have been quite stable, this one, Nathan.
It has been stable, and that's a little bit surprising because Carter Gordon is out. He failed an HIA, didn't make it back for this week. And then on the Brumbies side, Alessio back at fly half. So, yeah, it surprised me that this was static. Like, to me, I thought the news of Carter Gordon being out would have resulted in some movement, and it hadn't. And for that reason, and a few others, I would still be inclined to look towards the Brumbies here. I just think Carter Gordon's a really pivotal player for them.
Right, Chris, agreeing with you there. Brumbies should do this easy. Let's talk points then. 57.5. The Brumbies are, last one was a 31-24 last time, so this would have just missed against the Crusaders. But the Brumbies are a team over the years that has sometimes been, in recent years, let me put it that way, not the Brumbies of old, some quite low-scoring fixtures, focusing a little bit on defence. What do you think in this game, 57.5?
Yeah, I was projecting something closer to 58, 59 in this game, and there are better numbers out there than the one that was on screen. So I personally bet the over on 55.5. and one of the things with my points model is that I know that it tends to have a bias towards low scoring. So in the sense that it often is below the market number. So anytime I see overs, I tend to think that that's a bit of a flag.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Right. Let's move on to the next game. This is about 6:30, I think, on Saturday morning, South Africa time. It's taking place in New Zealand. Moana Pasifika minus 2.5 against the Waratahs, and a points line here pushing up towards the 60 at 58.5.
Yeah, and there's a narrative that you could probably build here around the New South Wales coaching situation. So obviously the news came out in the week that Darren Coleman, his contract will not be renewed for next year, which is not hugely surprising. And as I said, if you're trying to build a narrative around your handicap, it could work both ways. You could say that, well, if the players have not been happy with him and that has contributed to the results over the season, then maybe they'll be glad that they're hearing that he's gone. And the flip side could be that maybe they really like the guy, and they're kind of disappointed to hear this news, and maybe they'll play hard for him. I don't know. I think trying to handicap motivation in these sort of situations it's always difficult because, as I said, you can make two sides to the case, and you're also trying to handicap the psychology of 23 players, 23 plus, depending on the squad. Different people are going to feel differently about different things. So I think it's it's a bit dicey trying to do that. But the situation here is that the only reason I think we're seeing the number that we are is probably, well, two reasons. I guess it's the Waratahs results over the season, but also the front row issues they've got. I think it's been pretty well documented that they're now missing. I think it's all 10 of their original contracted front rowers are out. So they've got a few guys in off the building sites and that sort of thing. But that has been true for the last few weeks, and I'm just not convinced that Moana maybe are the team to take advantage of that. I don't think that scrummaging and front row play is necessarily their strength either. So for me, I think that I'm on the Waratahs here. All you need to do is get them to win, and I think it's probably a coin toss whether they do. I mean, the way I think about it is that if they played this game 100 times, how many of that 100 times are the Waratahs going to win? And for me, I think they'd win more than 50% of these games. So taking the 2.5, I think is a good bet.
Yeah, I'm actually in agreement with you on that one. I actually kept the Waratahs slight favourites in this game, so I did get on them early in the week as well. I also not, like you said, these are two sides. I don't think you can really say any one of them with confidence. You can really, say, well, right, I'm really going to pile them. But I'm also with you there, leaning towards the Waratahs. And yeah, I'll be up for this game. I actually quite enjoyed the early Saturday morning start South African time. So leaning towards it there. What did your model throw out as a points line?
I've got 60 and a half, so it's probably 60, 61. And again, I was happy to take the over there on a better number, which was at that time was 57. But right. There's still, at this point of the week, there's still a lot of kind of spread around in terms of points lines. You'll find the handicaps tend to sort of coalesce towards a particular number, but there's often like a bit of variation around on the points numbers. So depending if you like over or under, you can generally find a better number.
Yeah, do a little bit of shopping around, then you'll get yourself a better number. There has been a bit of movement towards the Crusaders in this game. There was sort of plus 7.5 early in the week, which is round about where I handicapped it. I think there's potentially some 6.5, and that's still out there. But I just checked PokerBet just before we came on, and that's where I took the lines from. Plus 5.5 Crusaders, and a points line here, very similar to the last New Zealand derby, 52.5.
Yeah, I think this one is one I will personally be staying clear of. I think a lot of the numbers that you're seeing, there's always this hope, right, that the Crusaders have turned the corner, and it seems to, every week there's perhaps somebody comes back and there'll be talk that well, now that the so-and-so's back, they're a different team and all this sort of things. So it's pretty much the same team as I put out last week. I think, Scott Barrett being out is clearly still an issue for them. So I think at the 7.5, which is where it was earlier in the week, like I quite like the Crusaders at that number. They've had the two home losses that they've had have been by 4 and 5 points to the Canes and the Reds, I believe. So it's not like at home they're likely to get blown out, but 5.5 is optimistic in terms of how you think the Crusaders are going to perform relative to how they've been this season. So I think that what it comes down to, I guess, is kind of like, if you think the Crusaders are something other than what they've been this season, then that's a great number. Personally, as I said, like that's a leap of faith that I'm not prepared to take right now.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. In fact, I find myself leaning, if anything, slightly towards the Blues there, because the Crusaders really have shown me. I think let's just talk motivation for a second there. Am I right in saying the Crusaders still have a chance of making the playoffs, but they do need kind of, I'm just trying to pull up the log now. I think they do kind of need other things to go their way, or is their fate still in their own hands?
Oh, that's a good question. I kind of feel like everybody has a chance to get there. There's probably teams that haven't even played this season that have a chance. But it's just the way that it works. Just give me a quick second. I'll have a look at this table. I quite liked the comment there from Chris. He said, burnt 3 weeks in a row catching a falling Satyrs knife, not again. And I think that's exactly right. I think that's a good summary of what I was trying to say, is that there is a lot of faith involved in backing the Crusaders right now. That you think they've turned this corner.
Yeah, and I think it's a great description, catching the falling knife three weeks in a row.
Yeah, like that. So Crusaders are 10th on 15 points, and the Drua are in 8th on 21. So yeah, I mean, with 2 games to go, yep, theoretically.
Yeah, and the Drua play the Highlanders. The Highlanders, I think, are in 7th on 23 or 22 from memory.
That's right. Yeah,
and they play, so one of them will lose that game. So that, I suppose, in theory, the Crusaders could get there with a couple of wins. But
in theory, yeah, and they'd have to obviously get probably the bonus point win, if not this week, then at least next week. So it would be really tight. One thing they do have going for them is their points difference, which, as I said, like, it's not like they've really been getting blown out. So yeah.
Yes. And Pro Tips are saying 52.5 is too low. I think I saw Johan Esthuizen also liking points in this one. And if the Crusaders, well, okay, that's also something. Then of course my immediate thought is Crusaders chasing a bonus point, the overs. But of course the Super Rugby bonus point isn't 4 tries; it's 3 tries more than the opposition, which is going to be one hell of a ask against the Blues.
Yeah.
And points line, what do you think of that one?
Right around this, to be honest. Yeah. I was projecting sort of 52. So yeah, it's one I've stayed clear of.
Fareed, I'm very much with you on that one as well. I think the Blues, we talk motivation, they are top of the table by 3 points, but they'll be looking to shore up top spot on the log. And I just think, Crusaders offered nothing. For me at 5.5, I'm getting quite interested in the Blues. I'm not sure about the points though. The Blues, one thing about them this season, they've based a lot of their good results has been on some very solid defense. And I'm a little bit nervous to go overs there. I'm with Nathan. I think it looks about right. Michael King coming in. I think I will live bet on this game and see which side is up for it for the day. I mean, that's a good point as well. I mean, you can. I know a lot of guys who love live betting. I must be honest. It's not that I don't enjoy it. I find it frustrating because there's like you place a bet and then you've got to wait for the bookmaker. I don't know what it's like if you've ever done live betting with your guys, but you kind of like. I remember sometimes I'll like 15 minutes I'm trying to get a bet done and the market keeps changing. So I tend to be a halftime punter or a pre-game punter. I tend not to do the live betting, but I know a lot of guys do enjoy their live betting there as well. So yeah, it's certainly going to be a cracking game and one not to be missed this weekend. Let's move on.
I think so. I was just going to say about the live betting. I think the other thing that is potentially kind of frustrating is that the live betting tends to be in front of the TV coverage. So what you're watching is always slightly behind where the bookmakers are actually at. So you're trying to kind of guess what's going to happen. Well, you kind of know what's happening based on the way the odds are fluctuating, and the things. So some of them better than others. Bet365, for instance, will actually have kind of a visualization, like a graphic type thing, telling you where the ball is, who's got it, what's happening at that point. But yeah, the TV coverage will be sort of 10 seconds, 15 seconds behind that. So you're never quite sure how what you're watching is real.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, from an entertainment point of view, I often don't look at the bookmakers' pages because there's nothing worse than watching something and then, like especially cricket, you're watching a guy batting and you're on him, and then you see the market suspend, and you just know, oh God, he's gone. So I tend not to watch it, but I agree with you that time lags a lot, and I've seen it on some of these guys who do these live YouTube shows where they're commentating on the game, and some other guys are watching and commentating in the live chat, and there can be some huge differences there in terms of where people are seeing things. Just to digress, a mate of mine, he watches the show, old Brendan, he'll probably watch it tomorrow. He had a mate who used to travel around the county cricket games he used to go over to the UK for like 3 months of the year with his laptop and high-speed connection and literally trade on Betfair. Like when a ball went high up in the air, he would like literally trade on Betfair that, because he knew there was a good chance the ball could go, making fractions, but trading obviously large amounts. But a lot of that's all been stamped out now as well. I think they block it at the grounds, and they won't let you have the laptop.
They call it court siding. Yeah, and I think originally
because in tennis, I think it was. Yeah, I remember there was a lot of guys who used to do that type of thing in tennis.
There were literally people that would travel around the world, following the ATP tour and doing this. And then what happened is that the ATP had people that they hired that were going around the world, spotting these people, and it became this sort of ridiculous game of cat and mouse where, because they knew them and they could recognize them, like I suppose you do
Yes.
it for long enough, they're probably mates, like it's just,
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
yeah, it just
It's like
becomes
a
a bit
game.
crazy.
Yeah, right. Well, I won't be flying to Brisbane to try and trade on this game. I can tell you Reds minus 13.5 against the Force. Just looking back here, I think in South Africa, it sort of opened Reds minus 14.5, but I did see on Twitter there was minus 16.5 overseas early. So there has been some support for the Force. Yeah, I quite like the Force here. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, you're right. It opened at 16.5, and I think that was clearly an off number. And people jumped all over that, including myself. So that did not last long. And I think at current prices, I would probably still look to the Force. It's kind of interesting because when I was looking at my own numbers, I had something around 14, and that's and in my head, I'd sort of handicapped the game as it being a lot closer than that as well. And I've got some, as I said, some separate power rating numbers that sort of made it minus 12. So I had the 3 green lights when I saw the 16.5. So I was all over that. Now the number I've got is sort of around 14. So when I look at the number now, I'm kind of like that would lead me off it. But if I was just betting with my gut and I didn't have like a ticket already in the pocket, I think I would still probably lean Force slightly anyway. I just think there's a possibility that this is a bit of a dogfight. Yeah, I mean the Force kind of look good, and the Reds, as we know, sort of wildly inconsistent at this point.
So, I mean, the Force for me, obviously at home, I've made some good money on them because I think the bookies have been underestimating them at home. On the road, they haven't been that strong. I did have a quick look. I think they pushed the Brumbies early in the season in Canberra to within 3 points, but they've had some disappointing results. But they're also still very much in the playoff hunt. And so I think there's going to be plenty of motivation there for them as well. I think they currently sit ninth. And yeah, with the Highlanders and the Drua playing each other, every chance that they can push themselves up into the playoff race. So I will say mine is gut. I'm saying Force. I took some 14.5. We unfortunately, as I say, well, that's the earliest line I saw. But yeah, I see the Crow Tips is coming in and saying over 33.5 a best bet this weekend, and Reverend saying Force not backable away from home. Yeah, I can't really argue with you there, Reverend. They haven't shown much on the road, that's for sure. This is 53.5.
I mean, they did. I'm just thinking out loud about that. And without going back through all the games, I mean, they did. I think they pushed they probably should have beaten the Highlanders away. To be fair,
Yeah, 7-6.
I think they ended up losing by 1, but I thought they were actually a better team on the day.
It's funny when I skimmed the results, I actually just ignore that 7-6 game. I think it was the worst game I've ever watched, and that was the famous game where I backed the unders, but actually backed the overs with the bookmakers. So
right, so you're right. Mentally dismissing that one. Yeah,
yeah, that's it. I think I just mentally block it off. Crow Tips likes Reds overs, and Johannes saying Reds points and minus. Yeah, 7-6 is Reverend. Oh, what a match! One we all, I guess, from an entertainment point of view, certainly want to forget. Right, let's move on to the next game. It's the last Super Rugby game. Highlanders minus 8.5 against the Drua, and points here 54.5. Highlanders disappointed me last week. I had them on the plus against the Blues. I was coaching rugby, so I wasn't following the game closely, but I'd look at my phone and things were looking pretty good at one point. And then when I saw the final result, I was like, what the hell happened there? They got hammered. And the Drua, of course, had some great results at home. They beat the Reds, I think it was last week, but they really have battled on the road. This looks a tricky one.
Yeah, unlike the Highlanders here, in terms of team news, so Jonah Nareki's back, and I've always been a big fan of his. Billy Harmon's back, and weirdly enough, and for a winger, Nareki, they've got 2 wingers now that are really good exponents of turning the ball over at the breakdown, and Harmon as well. And the Drua, by comparison, so they are missing a couple of regular back rowers, Diralingi and Miramira. And there's no Lamani as well, which I think is interesting because he is due back from suspension. He was available, I believe, but I wonder if he's still kind of in the naughty corner after what he did. So that's sort of the personnel changes. But I mean, ultimately, what it comes down to for me is that I think these are relatively even teams. They're kind of there or thereabouts, but it's sort of difficult to overemphasize just the discrepancy between the Drua's home and away records. So I went back and sort of looked at results from previous season, and excluded the games where the Drua were home, but they were actually playing in Australia because there was COVID conditions at the time, and also the Super Round games where there wasn't really a true home team, and so the Drua at home they win by average margin of about 3 points, and away from home they're losing by an average margin of 25. Now it's a small sample size, and in general, like I'm not into averages because I don't think they tell the full story, but you're still looking at something there like in the range of a difference of 20, which it implies that maybe the home road split between them is sort of around 10 points. So as I said, if you think that these teams are relatively even, and there's around about 10-point difference for the Drua away from home, again that gets me to the Highlanders.
Yeah, I'm also on the Highlanders. Yeah, I like them. I know quite a bit of support. I think I've seen in the Good for the Game forum there's some support for the Drua. As Farid says, they just uncommitted away from home. Probably a fair word for them. Although I imagine they are in the playoff race, they'll certainly come out with some commitment, but they just never seem to be able to hang on. And right, let's move on. Then we've done Super Rugby. We'll come back to best bets at the end of the show, but we've got two finals to look forward to. One of which is Friday night, which is great. Always nice to have some Friday night rugby. And it features South African team, the Sharks. They're up against Gloucester. That match is taking place at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. So, well, you could say it was a neutral venue. I guess it would be more favouring Gloucester. You would think, although the amount of South Africans that are living in London, I'm actually expecting quite a big turnout for the Sharks here. But what do your numbers throw at us for this game, Nathan?
I don't have any numbers for this. I kind of once you get outside of for a start, I actually never did Challenge Cup, and the reason why is that there were just too many random teams in there that didn't have enough background in the competitions. Like when you get the likes of Black Lion and sort of
the betting would come out like 3 hours before the game and stuff like that. It was in the early rounds. It was crazy. Yeah,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Cheetahs are still involved in this competition, right? And yet, because they're not playing week to week against any of these other teams, it's it makes it very difficult to try and model anything. So I stayed clear of Challenge Cup, but obviously pretty familiar with the teams from their domestic competitions, and it is a case of rubbish versus rubbish. All I would say, and I guess in Gloucester's defence, is that the Gallagher Premiership is super competitive. Outside of Newcastle, all of the teams were pretty similar, and Gloucester being second bottom, they have a bad points difference when you look at the table. But of course, a lot of that came down to a 90-0 loss. they rolled out the kids. Yeah. I see Farid saying this is the losers' final. Yeah, I mean it is. It's like how you could have a final between these two teams, I don't know. It's like that if you looked at two underperforming teams, it would be definitely these two. So look, I don't have a strong feel for this. I suspect that the Sharks should probably cover that number, but I wouldn't be rushing to put my money on the Sharks. So it's probably one I would stay away from.
Yeah, I must say, I'm also battling there. I look at that Sharks team and you think, geez, they should be able to do it, but they have been unreliable this season, even when playing with their top team. I must say, I did look at the points line here, and this is really just based on a bit of gut feel as well, but I do think we might get points in this game. I think all of the Sharks games have been fairly high scoring, and I think 2 of the 3 Gloucester knockout games have been high scoring. So I do think that we might get points in this game, but I'm going to wait and see closer to the time before getting involved. Dan says the Sharks are desperate for silverware. They certainly are, but whether that desperation is going to carry them there, well, we'll see. I imagine Gloucester are probably going to be pretty pumped up for it as well. Sharks' basic skills are terrible. Yeah, I don't think there's many on this forum that are going to argue with you based on what we've seen this year. So I'm leaning towards points there. I will, of course, be sending the newsletter out. If you still subscribe to my newsletter after the last 3 weeks, well, thanks very much. I appreciate your support because, geez, I haven't been on great form. I really have been able to stop trains at the moment. Right,
It's
let's move on
it's
to the
funny though,
big
because
game.
I did say that to Chris actually. There was a show when you went here just afterwards that we were kind of joking that we could sit here and talk about all these games and give out some reasonably good tips, and then we can count on you to discard all of that and then come up with something of your own and stick that into the newsletter. So.
Well, that's it. I've always been one who's sort of gone and the Lions have cost me in recent weeks, but I think from tomorrow is actually going to be all your tips coming up there, because I've almost decided mentally to take a little bit of a break from not from punting as such, but just take the pressure off myself. So it's going to be Nathan's best bet, I reckon, tomorrow in the newsletter. Right, let's move on to the big one, Nathan. Leinster -1.5, -0.5, depending on where you're sort of looking against Toulouse. This game also taking place, I think, at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as well. So same venue in London. So that is genuinely neutral territory. And we got points line here of 49.5. What sort of a final are we in for here?
Well, if you look back over the last 4 or 5 finals, however many it is, they've all been super tight, and pretty consistent in terms of their scoring. So it's highly likely to be a really tight affair. Probably within sort of five points or so. And obviously, Leinster having lost the last 2 finals, I think they'll be tight. They'll be they won't want to become the the Buffalo Bills of rugby and drop another final. So I think, and I haven't specifically looked and shopped around for a better number, but if I could get Toulouse 1.5, plus 1.5, 2.5 would be great. That's the way I would look, because I just think it's kind of going to be a bit of a coin toss, and in a game which is highly likely to be really tight, I just tend to favour the plus.
Just the boys talking about a bit of team selection there. Connors will start, I think, with Van der Vliet off the bench. That is the information I've had from Dave in Dublin. He's actually on his way tomorrow with his son to watch the games. It's going to be a great experience for them. So all indications are that Van der Vliet will play off the bench. Tika Wenger coming in. Leinster will choke again. I'd say it would be a harsh call to say any team who loses this game, it's pretty much an even game. I wouldn't necessarily call it a choke, but I do find myself leaning towards Toulouse here. I think over the 80 minutes, they may have a little bit too much for Leinster. I'm expecting potentially a game with points here. I think Toulouse are that sort of side that score tries, and Leinster, they look even how they started against La Rochelle in last year's final. They had 3 tries, I think, in the first 14 minutes. So I'm not convinced we're in for a low-scoring game, but I do think we're in for a tight game and sort of seesaw battle from side to side. A battle of the nines, says Faridia, and Blake is going to lose 1-12 or the try bet 7 or less. Yes, I agree with you there, Blake. It certainly, that 7 or less bet could certainly get quite a bit of interest. Right, that's it then. Just in terms of points, you got any thoughts there on the points at 49.5? Normally when you fancy a tight game, you do think lower scoring?
I just think that it's probably right around where it needs to be. It's if I was going to do anything, it would possibly be the under, but I think it's right where it should be. If these games, if you look back over as I said, the last 4 or so finals, they're right around here. It's very tight margins once you get to this point.
No, that's for sure. Des Simon's coming in on Facebook. I actually forgot we broadcast out to Facebook, so good to see you there, Des. Right, let's move on now to the best bets. First of all, anything else on the weekend? Any of the other leagues catch your eye? Anything besides Super Rugby and finals you're going to be looking at?
No, there's not. I mean, I do follow the NBA, but it's not something I bet heavily. Probably more just looking at other people's tips. So yeah, no, not specifically.
Mark just making a point. Leinster won the last 4 games to lose. I did see that in the head-to-head. They certainly have had the better of them, and they have played quite a couple of times in recent years. But for this is interesting because Leinster, for me, even if I think of their semi-final was against the Northampton Saints at home. I think they won 17-14 or something in the end. But they started off so strong. They had so much possession, but they just don't score like the Leinster team of old used to. It's almost more about defense, and they just don't seem to be able to put those chances away. So I think that's a fair comment. Johan, let's bring up your weekly treble. Highlanders -8.5, Tars +2.5, and Reds over 32.5. That's at 11-2 at world sports betting. And I am going to bring up, Fareed, you did post a bet, Grenoble blowing Dax away in the Pro D2. So there is a bet for you if we haven't covered enough rugby games for you in this one. Leinster will find a way to win, says Johan. Let's get into the best bets. Nathan, wrap up your thoughts for the weekend, please.
Yeah, so I think the two that I think have probably still have the most value of what's remaining on the board, I'd say taking the Waratahs on the plus. You could even go for the money line, to be fair, with that one. And, also quite fancy the Highlanders in this particular spot.
Right, I'm also leaning towards the Highlanders as potentially one of my best bets. I will be bringing the newsletter out, but rest assured, there won't be too much confidence behind it tomorrow. But looking forward to a great weekend of watching some quality rugby. I do love finals, so even the Sharks game on Friday night, looking very forward to that as well. Let's see what Joe has to say before we knock off. Leinster beat Start ST. I'm not sure ST is it. Toulouse.
I think it is Toulouse, but I think it's the.
Okay, just Start Toulouse. Yeah, I have seen it.
Yeah,
written like that. So Leinster by 3, and Fareed likes the Canes and the Blues as his best bet. Right, everyone, thanks very much. It was be good. Yeah, Mark, good luck to Leinster there, and Dave Cooney. Enjoy the trip with your son, mate. I think it's going to be great. I'm certainly looking forward to the weekend. Just relax a little bit and watch some great rugby. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week for the Handicap Rugby Chat That Matters.